we have the power to change people's beliefs. And why is that important? Well, people act out of their beliefs. So if someone believes something is in their best interest, they're going to act accordingly.
Welcome to No More Bad Events, a fun and insightful podcast for professional event organizers and for anyone at any level interested in producing nothing but the best events. Each week, we'll talk with legendary event professionals to get an inside look into what they think makes a great event. And in the process, we'll draw out insider secrets, non-traditional approaches, and compelling stories from the most captivating personalities in the business. We'll definitely get the skinny on reaching that one big goal: no more bad events. I'm your host, Scott Bloom, comedian, event MC, and now your podcast host. Let's get started. No More Bad Events is produced and presented by eSpeakers, the most trusted, easy-to-use, full-service online platform for finding, connecting with, and hiring the best keynote speakers, hosts, and presenters in the world. With the deepest catalog of professionals available through the eSpeakers marketplace, you can be assured that the speaker you book will be the absolute best speaker based on your goals, bar none. eSpeakers, the #1 way to find your next perfect speaker. For more information, go to espeakers.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of No More Bad Events. Thank you so much for joining us here today. You know, I always like to thank you folks, the listeners, for joining us because, let's face it, there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there. There are new podcasts popping up every day. I mean, it's no big deal to have everyone has a podcast now. I'm sure 90% of the people listening right now have a podcast. So I'd like to say congratulations to you folks. And I'd like to listen to your podcast. So if you do have a podcast, please text me on LinkedIn and I will listen to your podcast. We've been growing over this last year. We just had our year anniversary 2 weeks ago with David Adler. We are in our second year, our second season, so we're very excited about that. But I know that you're listening today specifically because you probably have a connection to my guest, and I'm so excited she's on the program today. My guest today is Sharon Reus. Sharon is president of the CPG Agency. Sharon is also a 30-year veteran of the communications and events industry, and she is passionate about what she does. I know this from not only talking to her on the program, but also from working with her firsthand. And on this episode, Sharon talks about using strategic content to create belief through experience and how the power of shared experience can change people's hearts, minds, beliefs, and behavior. We go into depth about a process CPG uses to help their clients effectively communicate the right message to their audiences. It's called the 5 Keys to Engagement. Sharon explains that these are tools anyone can use in building relationships between a company and their audience, and how you can use these tools in building relationships with anyone. Bottom line, she talks about breaking down walls, humanizing a company, creating feelings and thoughts, emotional relations, and measuring success by behavioral changes. Emotional ROI, so to speak. So I'm going to use those 5 keys to engagement right now as I lead into this interview and say, I care about you, I appreciate you, I hear you, I trust you, and I want to share this meaningful conversation with you because I feel you're going to grow from it. And I'm hoping the time you spend listening will yield you a nice emotional ROI. So, are you ready to be engaged? Of course you are. Okay, let's get to this. Here's my conversation with Sharon Reus. So, I know CPG Agency is a full-service creative experiential engagement and marketing agency. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Yeah, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you do a lot.
We do a lot. But I think what it boils down to, and we talk about creating belief through experience, but what our work boils down to is determining what our clients need to communicate and what's the best vehicle in which to do that, and how to change hearts and minds, beliefs, behaviors through that communication. And honestly, typically that's going to come through a large scale event. We do managers meetings, sales kickoffs, those kinds of events. And that's typical for us. But we also do internet portals or videos, or, there are a lot of different ways to have a shared experience.
So CPG Agency, a big agency, I know it's growing these days. What exactly is your role in this machine, and what are your main responsibilities?
I've been with the agency for almost 9 years now. I came in as an executive producer. That was my background. I've been in and around this corporate event business for most of my career. And then over the years, just developed into various leadership roles. At this point, I'm the president of the agency. I was actually named president in, I think it was June of 2020.
Well,
and if you remember
congratulations.
at all of, what was happening in June of 2020, it was kind of like, I'm president of what? I'm president of an events agency in the middle of a pandemic. So it's been an interesting ride the last couple of years. And thank you for the congrats. But yeah, it's been fun to be part of the revitalization of this industry and this agency as we've kind of come out of the last few years.
Yeah. I mean, is that something you ever expected? Did you foresee yourself being the president of an agency? I know you probably were always involved as an executive producer, but you have a lot more responsibilities. Is it your vision that you're trying to drive? I'm sure you're collaborating with a team, but what is your vision as president now that we're out of the pandemic? What are you focusing on?
Yeah. I mean, to go back to your earlier question, did I ever envision this? I don't think that I ever did necessarily envision this. I've always been a leader. That's just part of my personality. So I enjoy leading. And I think as I grew with the agency, that was a natural move for me. At this point, as far as vision, our two co-founders are still involved in the business. Keith Alper is our CEO. Steve Friedman is our chief strategist. So Keith is kind of over the Nitrous Effect, which is a collective of agencies, CPG being one of the largest. And so I'm responsible, as you said, for the vision of the agency, setting that and communicating that to the team and making sure we have the right people and resources to get there. And that as we grow, our output remains the same quality output that we've had over the years. That's the main thing for me. I really see this agency growing, but I also want to hold on to what makes us special, which is that white glove personal service, that Midwestern smile, and, just the attitude of what really has allowed us to have really long lasting relationships with our clients.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure that's the challenge as every company grows, is how do you give that personal touch? How do you still make it feel like a boutique agency as you're building out? I know you have an impressive roster of clients: Southwest Airlines, Anheuser-Busch, Ulta Beauty, O'Reilly Auto Parts. And I know CPG is all about the power of shared experience. So tell me a little bit more what that means and why it's so important.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about belief through experience. And that for us is not just a slogan. We know and have seen over the years that we have the power to change people's beliefs. And why is that important? Well, people act out of their beliefs. So if someone believes something is in their best interest, they're going to act accordingly. Or if someone believes they have a certain relationship with you, their boss, or you, their company, they're going to act a certain way. And so we start all of our engagements with clients with a very deep dive into it's the old advertising thing of what's the current perception and what's the desired perception. So what's your relationship, your company's relationship with your audience? And typically CPG plays in the business to internal space. So our clients are going to be companies that are communicating with either their employees or their franchisees, their dealer network. So it's a business to internal relationship. So we want to understand, what is that relationship right now? Is it a high trust relationship? Are there concerns on one or the other side? Are things, running smoothly? What are we trying to enhance or create or fix? So we do pretty deep dive work on that. And then from that, we look for, how do we create an experience that will change those behaviors or enhance those behaviors and beliefs in order to get the desired effect? So belief through experience for us is a really critical tool that companies have to create the results they want.
So how do you change someone's beliefs and behaviors? and you've done the deep dive. You say, here's the perception that exists. Here's the perception the desired perception we want. How do you get them to make that switch, that leap?
Yes, that's the challenge, right? And so, I think starting with strategy always, we're never going to recommend just, hey, this is a cool set, or this would be a great guest speaker for you, just for the fun of it. Everything in that experience is very carefully curated down to the look and feel of the room, the music that's playing, every inch of that, because we know that when people walk into an experience, they're going to take that in, and this is what's going to change their beliefs, right? So as we're designing, we go back to something called the 5 keys to engagement. And the 5 keys to engagement are a tool that anyone can use in building a relationship like this, as you are with an audience, a company and an audience in this way. So the 5 tools are: you care about me, I'm appreciated, I'm heard, we trust one another, and we share meaningful purpose. So if you, in your deep dive that we're doing with the clients, if we're finding out that there's a trust issue, we're going to craft an experience that addresses that. Or if, for example, the client feedback is that people in the organization don't feel heard, or maybe they're not contributing as much as they would like them to, we're going to create an experience that allows them the time to be heard. And that can take the form of an open Q&A session. It can take the form of a video booth where people can step in and create a little question for executives to answer, or an anonymous system. If there's also a trust issue, maybe it's an anonymous system of submitting these questions, or doing a best practices session where people can learn from one another and they can bring their best ideas to the program, and it's not just a top-down communication. So we're going through all of these steps and we're saying which are the most critical to address in this event, and how do we build an experience that addresses those?
I can see how this applies to big events. And I assume this concept can be used with small businesses or in their workday, or even between when you're debriefing with your team. I'm sure that's part of your culture as well.
Everybody's job has times when you need to affect people's beliefs or behaviors. So yes, I absolutely think this can be used in any business relationship. And I always give the example that, say you're a small business owner and you're going to have lunch with a potential client. Instead of just showing up and maybe you have your brochure or you have your PowerPoint or whatever, really think in advance. Where is your relationship with this person? Think about those 5 keys to engagement. Is there mutual trust? Do you share a mutual passion for something? Where are you in the relationship? And then where do you want to be? And just even taking 10 minutes before an interaction with someone to think about that is going to change the way you approach them. An example might be you're going to have a discussion with an employee about their future with the company. So just really taking a minute to think about where you are in that relationship and thinking about the 5 keys to engagement. Is there trust? Does this person feel heard? And what can I do in this interaction to make sure those things are being met? It's an intentional way of approaching relationships and communication that I think can make a tremendous difference.
I think we're sort of talking about humanizing the company, having a more emotional relationship. So that leads me perfectly into this buzzword that everyone's talking about, emotional ROI.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people have incorporated it into their corporate culture, into their lexicon. So you were recently at EMS, Experiential Marketing Summit in Vegas, where you spoke about emotional ROI. How do you define emotional ROI, and how does it come into play in your events?
So, you want them to have the feelings and you want to get that return on investment to get them to have the feelings. But let's take it a step further. What do you really want to have happen afterwards? What behaviors do you want to see or drive? What beliefs do you want to make sure are in place in order for you to meet your sales goals, grow your company, whatever your goals are for your company? And, EMS was great. We were there. If you know anything about Event Marketer, a lot of that is consumer facing. And our session was on internal facing. So this business to internal concept. And so we talked about how you can create emotional ROI with your employees or with your franchisees. And I think the difference with consumer facing events is there are a lot of ways to measure ROI for a consumer facing experience. You can talk about number of leads, sales, brand impressions, samples distributed. With an employee event, it's much harder to measure emotional ROI because you're talking about feelings and thoughts and, these actions that may not happen until months later. So I think, for us is we're looking to, again, that measurement piece of it is so important. Measure up front. Where are they? Where are their heads now? Where is that sentiment now? And then once we've crafted and executed this event that addresses their needs, where are they now? So that's how we're seeing it play out in our space.
Are we getting people to be a little bit more in a positive way, a little bit more touchy-feely, getting them a little bit more emotionally connected? And that's really important.
Absolutely. And I think anytime you work toward these keys to engagement, when you break down the wall, we talk about the fourth wall in show business, right? So between the stage and the audience, when you break down that wall by doing things like Q&As, very open Q&As, or you do things like putting the audience members on stage. So we did something for one of our clients where their opening module was a whole lineup of employees, each one wearing a t-shirt that had their power word for the year on it. So the power words were courage and, excitement and things like that, dream and all these great words. We put them on stage and there was a whole dance and music number that went on with it. But the audience just went crazy. They just loved seeing their peers on stage and recognizing them. And that is when you get the goosebumps, when you see that reaction from the audience.
Yeah, this emotional connection seems to be more and more important. It's probably somewhat of a result of the pandemic, of people being isolated and wanting now that emotional connection. We're talking more and more. It almost seems to be essential at meetings. So what strategies do you use to create emotional connections between attendees at events? I know there's the 5 keys, and I'm sure there's certain one of those 5 keys are almost essential in everyone, especially that concept of being heard. Everyone wants to be heard. But are you intentionally asking them to get outside their comfort zones? I mean, it starts with your clients. We're going to do something a little different. But how does that translate to the audience? Are they aware this is happening?
Oh, that's a great question. Are they aware this is happening? I think because we so frequently hear best ever, I think they are aware that something's happening, but I don't know if they're aware of, of what's happening, but I think they do feel that they are part of things. And so, when you think about the 5 keys, for example, the first one is you care about me. So one of our clients, I think it's brilliant that they do this. They put every year, they select one employee who has been through something. It could be personal adversity. It could be a major milestone for that person. And they work with that person who is not a professional speaker to get on stage and tell their story. And so to see one of your peers on stage and hear them talk about how they overcame something, and it's frequently not anything about work, but it translates into their work life of how they were able to, beat this adversity. Therefore, they were able to move up in the company or achieve a dream, that kind of thing. So I think that's a brilliant way to provide that connection.
So this is all great. And what I love about hearing about this is we're hearing new ideas, and the people listening to the podcast are always looking for new ideas. So the first key to engagement is to get them, how do you phrase it? To care about me?
You care about me.
You care about me. Let's see if we can find, if you can rack your brain for something new, a new idea or a new approach for each of the 5 keys of engagement, something that you saw live and said, hey, this is working. So tell me what the second key is. And then if you can, give me an example of where that played at an event.
So the second key is I am appreciated. And I think that our Southwest client does a great job of, they're the kings of culture, right? But they do a great job of acknowledging people. And this year, what they did, they have a program called Kicktails, where employees can honor another employee in the organization for something they've done. And this year, what they did was we created videos of people reading their own kicktails. So in other words, you gave me a kicktail thanking me for something, and we videotaped I'm reading it.
For the first time. They're reading it for the first time? Yeah.
Yes. And so you see that emotion on their face of how they feel being appreciated by a peer or by a leader in the company. So I loved that. That's, again, anytime you can put people on stage or put them on the screen, people love to see themselves. So I think that that's a way to get beyond the typical grip and grin award moment.
So what is the third key to engagement, and what event comes to mind?
So the third key is I am heard. And I think one of the best ways to do that is through some kind of Q&A. And this is a challenge. A lot of organizations, a lot of executives are reticent about getting up on stage and doing a live open Q&A because they're concerned that a question might come up that, first of all, might not be appropriate, might not be of interest to the entire audience. They might not have the answer right off the bat, and they don't want to look like they don't have an answer. So we get a lot of pushback about open Q&A. There are ways to do it that don't put the executives on the spot. So you can collect questions in advance using an app, using the little video booths where you can sit down and record your question in advance. People can send in questions via video or email. And then those questions are curated, and it gives the executives a minute to think about how they want to respond to those and to choose the ones that are most appropriate. The thing that is impressive to me, though, a couple of our clients, I know that they make sure that every question that is received is answered, whether it's on stage or in an email or something. That person, if I'm heard, then I want to be answered, right? So
exactly.
Q&A is not a new idea, but the way you do it and making sure you do it in that forum, I think, is so critical. And that just leads into the availability and accessibility of executives in general. So sometimes executives at these events, they're busy, they're trying to do their regular job, plus be at this 3-day event, and they don't necessarily make time to be fully present. The more fully present your executive team is, the more recognized and heard your audience will feel. So getting your executives to mingle at the cocktail party, getting them to do a clap line as people come into the general session room, those kinds of things are so little, they don't cost a dime, but really critical to the employees and the way they feel about working for that organization.
Yeah, as you said, it's just a little bit of effort to make someone feel very, very special. I like more of the idea of people coming up to a microphone. There's always that awkward moment. Do I want to raise my hand? And it never seems to go well. But I love the idea of doing like these video booths and having there some personal touch, or as you said, using an app and then having, we have a question from so-and-so. Can they please stand up? Maybe they read it or the executive reads it. I think that's a great idea. So let's talk about the fourth key. We trust one another. How did you design the event so that became an important theme?
I think a big part of demonstrating trust is allowing the attendees to be part of the event in a way that we don't always do. So letting them up on stage, whether that is having them present short segments or letting them workshop through problems that they have or doing best practices segments. Anytime you bring them into the programming and allow them to share their knowledge, allow them to share their questions, that demonstrates a trust between the executives, the executive team or the company and that audience. So I think breaking down the wall between what's happening on stage and the audience makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, you're making a more immersive, interactive experience. And I think more and more meetings are moving in that direction. It's almost essential now. People don't want to just sort of sit back and be told what to do or what to think. Yes. They want to participate. And by showing them up on stage or in a video, that sort of displays that concept. And let's move to the fifth key to engagement. What is that, and how does that show up on stage or in the event?
The fifth key is we share meaningful purpose. And a lot of times that's coming out in the conversations that are being had about that the meaningful purpose is the purpose of the organization. But it can also be demonstrated by either sharing what's happening throughout the organization already in terms of community service work. For example, one of our clients always shows a video from each region of what that region has done in terms of community service. Or it can be giving them an experience at the event where they can contribute meaningfully to something, to a shared purpose. So, for example, our O'Reilly Auto Parts has an opportunity for attendees to write postcards that are sent to veterans. And that's done right there at the event. And, we all know about the various bicycle builds and, stuffing backpacks and those kinds of things. But I think whenever you can share with the full audience what their colleagues are doing in other parts of the organization, it just builds that goodwill and that common purpose.
Yeah, another variation of CSR within the organization. You want to do both, obviously. You want to have that feeling of, hey, life is bigger than what's going on here in our company. But also, it's kind of interesting to bring that in. How can we do something that is working together to build something, within the company, within the culture? What advice would you give someone who is interested in pursuing this newish concept of making sure there's an emotional ROI, that there is belief in experience? What skills and qualities do you think are essential for success in this new belief system?
I think the first thing is that you have to be willing to step back. The clients we work with are typically, a lot of times they are meeting planners. That's their job, is to run the events for an organization. And so in that, they are very entrenched in finding the venue and working the meal plans and making sure everyone gets here and there and, those logistical pieces. So you have to be willing to step back and take a minute and think about that, do that discovery that we do. Think about, where is your audience's head currently? Where is their sentiment? Where do you want it to be? And then craft a statement, maybe a sentence or so, that encompasses that. That becomes your guiding light, and it becomes your way of making decisions. So does adding this element or taking away this element help us to get where we want to be with this sentiment? If you're willing to do that, even a little bit of that can make a tremendous difference in the outcome of your event, rather than what we often see is just sort of an autopilot, rinse and repeat. It worked really well last year, so we're going to do it again, without really thinking about, why are we doing it? Should we be doing it? Can we be doing it differently in order to meet these objectives? So I think it's that willingness to be open and to be brave, because it does take bravery to take these ideas up the chain to people who are very comfortable doing things the way they've always done them.
I think there's a real exciting time for meetings and conferences. I mean, because we're bringing in this humanizing quality, this emotional quality that, people won't be feeling always that, hey, I'm just going to this meeting because I have to, I don't want to be there. It's great if you can see in the surveys after the event, the post surveys, that people are having new experiences, that they are feeling things, that they are more connected to their culture, to their company. Right. I like what you're talking about giving a voice to the people in the audience, making them just as much of a part, breaking down that wall. Yep. I think that's important. And of course, being heard and trust go together as well. People need to be heard. The more they feel heard, the more they build trust. So I've definitely learned a lot from this conversation. I hope people who are listening have taken this in and can view things just a little bit differently. As you said, there are going to be some obstacles along the way. People like to do things the way they do things, but you can start to move that needle just a little bit. Let's have an objective. Let's have that guiding light. That's where we're going towards. It looks a little different. And by everyone getting on board and, as you said, taking a risk to do something else, these meetings and these experiences are just going to grow and become more meaningful and more impactful.
Right.
So thank you, Sharon. I really enjoyed speaking to you. This has been great. And I hope to see you sometime soon. We've worked together in the past, and I hope that happens sometime soon as well.
It will for sure. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Sharon. That's it for now. I've been your host, Scott Bloom, corporate event MC and comedic keynote speaker. and of course, your connoisseur of connections. Oh, by the way, if you're interested, you can book me for your next event on eSpeakers Marketplace at espeakers.com/marketplace. And if you like what you heard, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you loved what you heard, drop us a review and don't forget to share with your friends. No More Bad Events is produced and presented by eSpeakers. Thanks so much for listening. Now go out and make your event a great one.